Hey guys, and welcome to the show. This week I have with me Parker Lee and Anitra Jackson. Hi guys, how are y'all?
Good. How are you, Lex?
Happy Friday.
Yeah, it is Friday when we're recording this. Hopefully it's Friday when you guys are watching it too, because that means that your weekend is approaching. And that's always fun. But you know what that means? That means 2 days later it's a Monday. So there is that. But you guys are going to help us understand Power Apps today, and I'm really excited about this episode because I think, Parker, you're going to explain to us what Power Apps are, and then Anitra, you're going to actually build the Power App. Is that the plan?
That's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited. So hopefully by the end of this episode, everybody that's watching it will understand what a Power App is and understand how Power Apps are built. And you can even follow along, right, and build your own.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. So Parker, I'm going to start with you. Give us a little description of Power Apps.
Yep, absolutely. So I would say Power Apps is founded on this new trend in technology called low code. And it's basically the idea of being able to build robust business applications while writing very little to no code. And so obviously the value there is you can start to leverage either the people that are closest to the problem, so folks that may not be technical but are out there with the business problem, and then you can also make the folks that manage and create technology for a living even more efficient. And so low code is actually, really taken off both in the federal space where Anitra and I work, and then also in the commercial space. And actually, there was a Gartner study that was recently published that said that 65% of all applications will be low code by 2024. So it's a really, really exciting space to be in. Essentially, you're able to build applications that fill the gaps between what you might get out of the box and what you might be able to build with something like custom code. So whereas previously you had business users using whatever they could get their hands on, running a whole department out of an Excel spreadsheet, or trying to build these really complex applications in something like InfoPath or SharePoint, now they can actually build cloud-based applications that have relational data models, that have connections and APIs, and that are able to integrate natively with things like Office 365. So Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI is what Microsoft refers to as our Power Platform suite. And it basically makes up the sort of three pillars of all that it takes to build a business application. So Power BI is where the visualization side sits in. So, you can really easily drag and drop and create these really robust visualizations that connect into all kinds of data, whether it's on-prem or whether it's in the cloud. Power Apps is the actual application development platform. It's kind of like building a PowerPoint slide and then dragging and dropping elements onto it. And it's really, really easy. A lot of the pieces have been sort of abstracted and configured away so that folks that, who manage SharePoint or who maybe aren't custom devs can actually build these really cool applications. And then the last one is Power Automate. So it's basically a workflow engine that kind of lives behind this entire system and lets you automate actions between applications. So if you've got, a CRM system and you want to basically be able to send an email every time a certain trigger happens, someone puts in an expense, someone puts in a new sales opportunity, you can build Power Automate to make those connections. And then the last piece that is coming to, it's not yet in GCC, but it is available in commercial, is actually something called Power Virtual Agents. And that is when you're starting to get into natural language processing and chatbots and everything else. And so the other cool thing about the platform is once you build these business applications and once you build these business processes in, then you have all this wonderful telemetry that's living in the data store for this platform, which is called Common Data Service. And so from there, you can actually start to explore, AI scenarios or start to be, introspective about your processes, because now that you have all of your data centralized, you can start to analyze it and say, okay, in this process, where are the bottlenecks living? What determines mission success or mission failure, and how can we continue to improve? So it's a really interesting system, and we're excited to sort of share a little bit more today.
Hey, Parker, I hear you have a slide deck for us.
Yep, got a little something prepared just to kind of talk through what we're seeing in my space and do a sort of an intro on the Power Platform. So yeah, if that's of interest, I can go ahead and share my screen here.
Awesome. Let me just turn off my camera and I'll give you the floor.
Fantastic. All right, so we're good. Everyone can see the screen?
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. So just some quick slides to talk through the way that we see the business application landscape playing out, some of the benefits of leveraging a low-code tool, and then a really, really sort of simple introduction before we do Anitra's demonstration on how to build your first Power App. So the business application landscape, as we see it, you can kind of think of it like this. These pillars represent the core agency business applications that make up the backbone of any, federal agency or any commercial business. They can look like marketing or sales or finance or operations, field service, things like that. And what we oftentimes see is they're rigid. In many cases, they're difficult to change. They're not particularly flexible. They're maybe a little bit politicized. In many cases, they can also be a little bit older because they're so expensive to replace. And in many cases, what we see is these applications have gaps between them. They don't always do everything that the business user needs them to do. And so the business user is trying to make sure that they can get their job done. And they're facing the changing landscape, whether it's in the commercial space or in the federal landscape, where you have changing expectations from citizens, changing mission requirements, changing regulatory requirements. And ultimately, these applications don't always fit everything the business user needs. So what tends to happen is we see what's called little business applications sprout up between the cracks. And in many cases, these can take on many different forms, and we'll talk about some of those forms that we talked about. But they tend to grow larger than they were really ever meant to be. And they end up becoming these really kind of unwieldy pieces that lack a centralized database. They are not efficient to use. They have an inconsistent UI. They might be, one process that takes 7 different applications because no individual app can ever sort of cut the mustard. And then they also don't have the same security features that those original, core agency applications might look like. So they can take on several different forms. They could be paper processes, which obviously paper processes, not so great for the environment, but also very inefficient way to do business, because you lose that piece of paper, all of a sudden you've lost data, nothing's in a database, so you can't visualize or analyze. They could be legacy custom developed applications where someone has called in a developer, which can oftentimes be expensive, to just build them something really quickly. Well, then that developer leaves and you're left with technical debt. You're left with a bunch of folks who don't understand the entirety of the code. And then as those business requirements change again, you're suddenly left with a really, really difficult system to change. They could be people running enterprise business processes through something like email, where you're emailing in a request to, change your password, or emailing your request to open up a case, or request an asset, or request an acquisition. And all this important information is lost in the individual emails of lots of people. And I think, as we've seen since the beginning of this unfortunate pandemic, is we are all inundated with information in email. So how do we reduce the email burden in a way that makes sense? They can take on quasi-business applications like Excel or Access, where you're running an entire time and reporting application out of an Excel spreadsheet, which could be subject to erasure, doesn't really act like a database, doesn't integrate with anything else, and probably requires some training and institutional knowledge to even understand how to use. One thing that we've seen a lot of, at least in my accounts, is over-customized SharePoint and InfoPath, where you're building these SharePoint 2010 or SharePoint 2013 workflows to meet a business process. SharePoint's not really a relational database. Trying to integrate that with any other system is also very unwieldy. And then, of course, InfoPath, which is actually going end of life. So all of these different applications can, in many cases, stand in the way of what you're trying to do as a commercial organization or as a federal agency. And so they get in the way of the mission. They tend to provide headaches for the business users. And in many cases, they can also be very expensive to maintain and change. And so one thing that I like to ask the folks that work in IT is, what is the time delineation between you adding new features to support the business and you just maintaining your existing applications as they exist? And why is so much time spent maintaining them? And there's actually another statistic I'll throw out. 60% of CIOs report an application backlog because of all these things that we're talking about today. And so every single application that's in that backlog is a missed opportunity to support the business and support the mission. So this is what we call the last mile of digital transformation. You've got your core business processes, you've got your core applications for things like HR, administration, finance, and then in the federal space, we often hear the word mission described, especially with some of the space agencies. Agency services like case management, grants management, correspondence management, requests from Congress, these core applications. And we oftentimes see these custom line of business apps that crop up between those. And in many cases, they can also grow to be just as large as the original core application that they are, built to sort of supplant. And so the problem is we have all these different custom apps sitting out, and you're requiring your business user to memorize and understand 10 different applications to do one simple process. And so when you have to onboard new folks, you increase their onboarding time, you cause a lot of wasted time and missed deadlines because you're just relying on institutional knowledge instead of a simple consistent user interface and consistent UI. So all of this sets the stage for the idea of what we call low-code application development. Low-code is basically the idea of a visual approach to building applications, which empowers everyone, regardless of their technical depth, to turn their ideas into applications. And that's what we're talking about today. And so because of the power of low-code, you can build applications about 70% faster than if you were to custom develop. And Gartner, once again, estimates 65% of all app dev will be low code by 2024. And another thing driving this is the talent gap. Organizations, 86% of organizations struggle to find the technical talent that they need to build those applications. Another scenario that we're seeing right now at one of the agencies that I worked with is there's an entire large group of folks in the science and research space, and they have an application that they use to record all of their scientific data. And it's been built in Access with custom code developed against it. And so they're reliant on this single coder, this single developer in their 200-person organization to do any modification to this application. And so you can imagine all of the different important requests that are going to have to get backlisted and all the pressure that's on that one person. And then what happens if they leave the organization? Then you're really in trouble. And then in addition, the demand for apps is only going to grow over the next 5 years. And the demand for things like AI. And I know many organizations want to get to this AI future state where they're having humans working assisted by machine learning in their day-to-day processes. Well, the first step to getting towards an AI future is just unifying your data and building solid applications so that you're collecting the right telemetry. So now that we've set the stage on low-code application development, we'll talk about Microsoft's Power Platform. It's our best-in-class low-code platform that integrates natively with Office 365, Azure, Dynamics, and even our competitors. We actually have out-of-the-box tools that connect to our competitors as well. So the four basic pieces of the Power Platform that I mentioned earlier are Power BI, which is your visualization business analytics tool, Power Apps, which is your actual low-code application development tool, Power Automate, which is your process automation tool that works behind the scenes, Power Virtual Agents, which is chatbots, natural language processing, tier 0 routing so that you can save time of humans answering really simple questions like, how do I change my password? And then all of this sits on top of what we call the Common Data Service, which is essentially a low-code software as a service database that has over 120 connectors in the Gov Community Cloud and over 300 connectors in commercial. And so the power of the Common Data Service is it allows you to unify all of the data existing on these disparate, potentially legacy applications. And then we also have scenarios where you're engaging people that are external to your organization. And for that, we use our Power Platform portals. And then in the commercial space, we also have a feature called AI Builder that lets you seamlessly integrate AI tools into all these applications. So this entire suite is built to work together. You can drive a business process by building a Power App. You can act on that data during analysis. You can automate the app using Power Automate. And then you can use Power BI to basically analyze the data exhaust that comes out of those applications. All of this is sitting on this Common Data Service, which allows you to centralize applications from potentially 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe even dozens of different data sources, all into a single platform. And then the other thing I wanted to call out that makes Microsoft unique is we own and manage the applications that your business users work in every single day. So we're able to integrate scenarios where you're tracking emails intelligently to a case in Power Apps using something like Outlook. One of my favorite features is bulk importing and exporting from Excel. So all that data that's stuck living in Excel, you can allow people to still build and create what they want in Excel, upload that into the common data service, and now you're turning Excel into that database that it never really was. It has the native integrations to SharePoint, which replaces a lot of those SharePoint 2010 workflows. And we can even embed applications in Teams. The ability to embed a Canvas app into Microsoft Teams has entered GCC. And then in the commercial space, there's all kinds of other scenarios where that works out. So a quick story I wanted to share about how this has played out in real life. This is a public-facing story that we can share potentially afterwards, but this is the American Red Cross. And so obviously their mission, among other things, is to provide disaster relief timely and effectively where it's needed all across the US and internationally. And so in order for instructors who are conducting different CPR trainings or getting assets out in the field, they originally had to fill out a paper form that you see to the right here. So the problem with this form is there's no database in the back end where you're able to track your reorder levels, how much of each asset you have. This paper could potentially get lost, and then all of a sudden you've got instructors on the front line that aren't getting the assets they need, and nobody at the provider service understands what they need. Another thing is paper is kind of wasteful, and it's also inefficient. So they were actually able to replace this paper form with the Power App that they built in a matter of weeks. And so this Power App was basically built using this drag and drop UI. As you can see, it's very user friendly. It's available on mobile. It's available on tablets. Another problem we see a lot of times, applications are not optimized for mobile. And mobile demand is actually increasing 5x over the next 5 years for new applications. And so by building this with the Power App, they were able to streamline their process, and they actually reduced their time to resolution from 4 weeks to 4 days. So being able to, cut down 3 weeks worth of time to get the right assets into the field makes a huge difference for what the American Red Cross tries to do as a mission. So this is just one example of the way that Power Apps is being used. And so I'm not going to go too deep into the platform because I do think that Anitra is going to give a great demonstration of it. But this is just a really quick slide on Power Apps. You can see the UI. There are actually 2 kinds of Power Apps. The first one is called a Canvas app, which is basically a blank canvas that you actually drag and drop different elements onto. It's basically like a PowerPoint slide that you drag, buttons and fields and forms onto. There are also other scenarios where you can start looking at, floor mapping and seat mapping. And so Canvas apps give you the most flexibility in building the application. Then you have model-driven applications, which are built on top of the common data service and include some really cool out-of-the-box features that make things simple, like a business process flow that you might be able to see in the right. It's a little bit small. So model-driven apps, it lets you leverage a relational data model, and it includes a lot of things out of the box that are usually indicative of more robust applications. And so model-driven apps look a lot like Dynamics 365. One thing I did want to call out is Dynamics 365, at least on the non-finance and operations side, so the customer engagement side, is essentially a first-party model-driven Power App. And so you could actually rebuild parts of Dynamics by creating Power Apps. So the beautiful thing about those 2 technologies is you can leverage Dynamics 365 for these out-of-the-box scenarios, such as field service, sales, marketing, and then you can build Power Apps for the scenarios that sit in between, that last mile of digital transformation that we talked about before. And we haven't forgotten about external users. We're able to build responsive websites that you can surface externally with portals. You can embed Canvas apps and model-driven apps into portals in the commercial space. And so this is a really simple way for you to start to surface some of these capabilities to people that may not be part of your organization. And so the beautiful thing here is when you are a customer or an external user of a portal, you can surface, create accounts, and then surface information about a request. So let's say, I am a government agency that provides services to citizens. When a service request is put in through the portal, they can create an account, log back in, see the status of their request. So now you're having this back and forth with the folks that you serve every single day. And then I wanted to sort of call out Power Automate as well. This is the basic Power Automate UI. You can set off a trigger an action, and then even include things like conditional logic. So this is a good example of creating a file based off of a new email. So if you wanted to, take every email that you received in your Outlook and then create a file in OneDrive and then be able to save all of those attachments into one place, no more surfing through your email. It's all existing right there in a OneDrive folder. Another scenario that we see is really common is any kind of approval where you have someone coming in and requesting a service. You can use your Azure Active Directory to come in and say, all right, I want to grab that person's manager, and then I want to send them a Power Automate request, which can be surfaced in both Teams and Outlook. And then if they say yes, we do this. If they say no, we do that. So really, really simple way to service up approvals. And it doesn't just work with Power Apps. It connects out of the box to things like ServiceNow and Salesforce, custom developed applications. You can actually create custom APIs. So Power Automate is that workflow engine that lets you unite different actions between applications. And I would say from all of my clients, the most common challenge I see for them is data silos. So Power Automate can help break down some of those data silos with those out of the box connectors. And then we also have even extensions for RPA, where you're dealing with an application that doesn't have an API. We offer both attended and unattended RPA as a part of Power Automate. So if you look right here, this is the product is called UI Flows, and it actually has a Power Automate connector. So now you can take this RPA telemetry that you're getting out of the application, introduce that into Power Automate, introduce that into Common Data Service, unify your data, and put it all in one single place. So we're supporting applications that are in the cloud, applications that are on-prem, and even applications that don't have an API. The last piece that I'm going to highlight is Power BI. So that's the visualization side of the Power Platform. And it's basically a really simple tool for self-service analysis. It's got native integrations to things like Excel, Access, as well as cloud and on-prem services and databases. It has all those connectors so you can continue to connect those disparate data sources. And you can build these really simple but very, very intuitive and powerful visualizations using what is essentially a drag and drop tool. And when I was a business analyst before I joined Microsoft, I operated a lot in these types of tools with Power BI, serving these types of dashboards up to management. And it really is helpful to be able to surface the insights that run your organization very simply in an automatically refreshing way. Another cool thing is Power BI can actually be embedded into Teams tabs. So you can surface these to actual applications right where your users are working in every day with Microsoft Teams. So a couple of different scenarios that we see with this platform. You can extend your Office 365 applications. You can build mission critical end-to-end solutions. One thing we see a lot of is the task management side of things for government agencies. You can also extend legacy applications, and Microsoft is actually a great case study of how we've done this. We have a tool called the Thrive Time Away app. We had some very legacy systems that were working on the back end for our time and reporting. And so instead of ripping and replacing our HR or our finance system, all we did was use Common Data Service to connect into that data store and then build a Power App on the surface. And now we send all of our tens of thousands of users through that Power App. And the cool thing too is because you're using this modern cloud native technology, it's not just about time and reporting. You can actually go in there, and if you were to use it today, you would see, how many hours you have left of vacation. But then once you made the request, it would automatically send an email to your manager using Power Automate. You can set an out of office message in Outlook. You can block off your calendar. You can automatically send an email to everyone on your team, and it knows who's on your team because of your Azure Active Directory. So now you're making things really, really simple and really intuitive without having to rip and replace an entire legacy system. And so just a really good sort of one slider about how the whole platform works together. You've got your app designer, you've got your Power Apps at the top here, forms, views, dashboards, Canvas apps. And then you've got Power Automate for the workflow and business processes that might exist between applications. And all of this sits on top of the Common Data Service with it's now over 300 connectors in commercial, 120 in Gov Community Cloud. And then it also integrates with our competitors. So it works with all the applications wherever they live. And it has that native hook into things like Office 365 and Azure if you want to start building some really advanced AI scenarios, or you've got data stores that live in Azure. So with that, I will sort of close it up and hand it over to Anitra to start demoing building your very first Power App.
Well, that's awesome, man. Thank you so much for that. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Got dark. I see I'm now darker than when I started.
Oh, yeah. That happens. Sometimes cameras auto adjust for light, so that's just kind of part of the deal. As the sun goes up or goes down or shadows float across the windows, I'll see that happen all the time. But man, that was great. I really appreciate you doing that. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to make that part 1, and then we'll make Anitra's stuff part 2. How's that sound, Anitra?
Yeah.